So, welcome to Beard Banter. A little bit of a weird Beard Banter in the sense that it's going to be pre-recorded at IOTSSA here, and then we're going to drop it next week sometime when we get that edited. So, if you're seeing this, you're in the past. And I also want to say thank you for getting my badge back.
Oh, you're
It was
welcome.
very
You're
nice of
welcome.
you.
I saw it on the table. I was like, oh, I should pick up Matt Lee's name badge and introduce myself as Matt Lee until I get
It
it.
was very good. Yeah, and it definitely, conferences are actually really bad about this.
Yeah.
There's immutable identities that Microsoft does called verified IDs, and they had a conference. It was an engineering airlift I went to in Seattle a couple weeks ago, or 3 or 4 weeks ago, and you had to check in with that verifiable ID.
Okay.
The interesting part about that was they had a failsafe that if you had a problem with your verifiability, they could check your identity and give you your badge, right? So I was like, cool. So then I watched a woman walk up there and they said, "Hey, yours is messed up. We don't need your ID. We're going to go ahead and get it to you." And I'm like, broken access control. You took advantage of absolutely no access control.
No access control.
And just took my badge, but it's fun.
I think most conferences you go to, it's pretty lax on that,
Oh, for
anyways.
Sure. Yeah.
And especially people that they're used to seeing. I think Jason Slagle made mention that, the name tag stealing and everything else.
Oh, yeah.
I remember a certain conference that we went around and reprogrammed RFIDs.
I was involved in that as well.
We were
allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
So
Yeah.
anytime you look at securities as a whole or conferences as a whole, especially cybersecurity one,
Yeah.
there's always somebody looking on how can we circumvent. When you have everyone's mind focused on just the general concept of how can I hack this, how can I fix this, where is the access control broken, you're gonna run into that.
Yeah.
And it could be as sly as, oh, I know Matt Lee. I'm gonna hand him his name badge. In fact, I'm meeting with him here in a little
Right.
bit.
Yeah.
That's like, oh, perfect.
Social engineering attack
Yeah.
number one.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. 100%.
Building trust.
Yeah. I think what the interesting part is, though, is when you start thinking about cybersecurity conferences, there is a higher standard, at least expected, of the humans coming, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so I think that's where it gets the worst. But, when we allegedly did the badge changing to that one human, there were real world implications, right? We didn't realize vendors were paying to read those badges, and we gave them 500 of the same name. Let's call them Schmess Benzer. Yeah, that was fun. But I do think that at conferences like this, I'd love to see people putting money where their mouth is and involving their staff, their event staff, all of them to understand security first. And I think it's kind of corollary, right, to the challenge we have. I was talking about this on stage here at IOTSSA earlier, was vendors have been so able to be good at delivering a product, but not giving a crap about their security, right? And that's been, we're in startup mode. I had a vendor that had done some really shady things with their code and their application. And when I called them out on it, they're like, yeah, but we're in startup mode. We'll get through this. And it's like, at some point, we all have to start putting on our big boy and girl pants and doing that in a more meaningful way at every level of what we do.
From a vendor perspective, though, if you're not putting security at the forefront of your thought process, at the conversations, at the boardroom table, you really are doing a disservice to those early customers.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you have a product that takes off, that skyrockets, you're never going to be out of startup mode because your growth just continues to take off, and you're like, okay, now we have to put attention to security. Oh, now we have to. Now we've
got budget. We'll solve it.
Yeah. They can't. The next thing you know, the can is 10 miles down the road, and you're dealing with a security incident.
I mean, look at Uber. That psychotic password being stored in a PowerShell was probably an early flex move that had to happen to make this work. But nobody ever went back and fixed and iterated it, right? And changed it. And I'm making some speculation, so understand if you're watching this, I'm not saying I know the whole thing, but I would say it's contextually believed that that's one of the challenges, is that people don't ever fix what they did as a Band-Aid to get us through here. And it's no iteration back to that. And I think that goes back to what cybersecurity is. It should be an iterative process. If you ever looked at your work as a technician a year later and gone, man, I sucked last year. If you haven't, you stopped growing. Right? That's kind of the concept.
100%.
Yeah. So I think that's what happens oftentimes in startup mode is the profit comes, the growth comes, but oftentimes they're milking either through equity investors or investors that have brought that to that point. They have to make those profits first. And to your point, the earliest victims are those customers that came in when it was even worse. Like there's a great vulnerability management product out there that started off by having some serious vulnerabilities in the way they built it, and then they fixed it, and it's a great product now. But there was early risk for a lot of those humans that decided to use it, even though they were benefiting themselves to put it in place, right? And this is kind of what I talked about on stage, is that you got to start asking those questions to your vendors. You got to start saying, hey, Do you have a security and compliance framework you use? Are you testing your application? What are your pen tests actually looking for? How are they scoped? What are the and that comes into nuance of, you could understand that.
Yep.
You could go look at it and go, I got a good idea of what's happening here. But if you took 100 humans, 98 of them probably could not. And I don't mean that to be a diminutive or even aggrandizing, but it's just genuinely, I think, one of the gaps in our industry of being able to understand total kind of approach to security and put a framework around that, you know?
It comes to mind the old quote of, those that want security and liberty deserve neither.
Fair. Or
Because
something to that effect.
because
Yeah,
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 to
yeah.
that effect, it's like
Yeah.
you can't have utmost security and
Right.
utmost freedom at the same time.
But you can educate yourself to get to a point where you're at a happy stasis.
Correct. It's
I think
finding
that's
that line, finding that medium, finding that point where you're securing and you have the tools in place that can alert you when something's going on.
Yep.
To the point of, have now hit the security line.
Yeah.
Now let's make that as easy as we can for our employees.
And what is security? Like, I think oft misdefined security. Security is, I'm going to stop and protect you. Nope. Nope. Sometimes security teams are trying to lessen the damage. Like, take it to physical human security. Sometimes they're just a bullet catcher in front of the other human, but there's still a chance of that risk. And so you start getting into, security has to be a healthy ecosystem of protection, after identification, because you have to know what you own first, right? And then protection, detection, response, recover. We often talk about protecting you to the fullest, when the answer really should be, I'm protecting you because I have identified your assets appropriately and categorized them, tagged it where I need to, been able to protect it, and then I also have a very rapid detection capability, a very mature response capacitance, and a very mature recovery capacitance. And so when you start thinking about security in that life cycle, in that ecosystem, telling people I'm going to stop a threat is incorrect in what a actual ecosystem looks like in security. It's failure, iteration, limiting damage, limiting blast radius. It's easy to pull my string on that, but I just think we've misdefined security so much that it needs saying.
It does, 100%. And I always go back to the common line of, you can't protect what you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I joined LionGuard, was because we are that data collection. We are that auditing tool that gives you.
There's a visibility layer in one place to try to aggregate some of that stuff and set those kind of exceptions.
Yeah. But I'm going to switch the topic real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to play the opposite side here for you.
Okay. Fair.
But I know LionGuard just made $1,000 contribution to the beard.
They're murdering beards.
And we had another one. Who was the other one that just?
We had LionGuard, and just before that, we had 2,500 from Black Point Cyber.
Black Point. Nice.
Yeah. It was really awesome. You guys got us 1,000. Joe personally put in money as well.
Oh, nice.
Himself, separately of that. So I think it was very awesome. I appreciate it. And you were part of it. You're part of driving this forward. Well, for anybody that hasn't followed this, if you're watching this next week, it'll still be a week before we shave our beards.
Yeah.
But we're shaving our beards for charity. We've picked out four cybersecurity focused charities, 5 total charities, that we're going to donate $20,000 each to. And we're at 81,000 or so of that, 82,000 of that raised as of this moment. We will hit the 100,000 and give everyone $20,000 by the time we shave. We'll be shaving at IT Nation Connect. You and I getting celebrity barber shaved on live stream. I will have a 6-hour live stream of us, 4-hour live stream of us shaving beards. There are 17 of us doing it. Some of those names include Vince Chrysler, former assistant of the White House.
Yep.
We got you at LionGuard. We got me. We got Matt Hash up in Canada, my counterpart in Canada, on the SSC side. He's not on the SSC side. He's on another sales consultant side with us, but cybersecurity focused. And then, we've got just a hodgepodge of idiots, right?
Yep.
That's exactly what I called the chat that we're in. It's a hodgepodge of idiots. But we are doing it to raise money for Women Who Code, who is a international organization, obviously, that teaches people and tries to drive equality in cybersecurity and in technology in general in women and men. We have Diversity Cyber Council, which is an awesome Atlanta-based charity trying to serve that 17 to 18-year-old underserved populace in mid-city Atlanta. We have Bits and Bytes, which is a girl named Kayla. She actually had a TED Talk when she was 13 years old about disinformation campaigns.
Wow.
Like this was 8 years ago. Like, I didn't even know the term 8 years ago. And so this young lady has spent her time building content for 8th grade classes to learn about cybersecurity topics at a very early age. And so we're funding that one. And then Bike Walk Wichita, which is just a bicycle function for homeless. They're trying to bring the homeless population in Wichita into a kind of a healthy ecosystem of building, repairing bikes, and then selling them and all, and giving them bikes and all that stuff. But and then the last one is Hackers for Vets. And Hackers for Vets is a friend of mine, Mike Jones, Mike the Haunted Hacker Jones, who had different inputs when he exited his information warfare dominance world as a military person. Maybe would not have gone on the black side of things initially. And so he uses some of that backstory and a scholarship fund to help fund exiting DD 214 military veterans that have exited, safely, or what do you call it, honorably discharged, and fund their move into cybersecurity.
Nice.
So laptops, things like that. But those are the 5. If we go over 100,000, we're gonna start letting Shavies pick charities to donate to. So if we get over that 100 grand, we have extra, we'll give a few thousand here, a few thousand there to these other charities.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And the charity front comes to me mindset, not because I need the money aspects of it, but 2 years ago, we started and founded the Cybersecurity Association of Pennsylvania.
Right.
Which, by last count, I think we broke the 700 member mark. We offer.
Would that be your designation of our charity funds if you pick one?
It might be. It might be, but I think there's a lot of worthy charities out there that could use a little bit more help. I have a great MSP community in my backyard that I've networked with across the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Because you're a damn giver.
Even being here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I know a lot of the different MSPs that drove in for this event here at IOTSSA. And because I have that rich community, I think overall the nonprofit is in a great place to succeed. We've already been invited.
Good, man.
And we testified for House and Senate here in Pennsylvania on breach notification
I saw that.
laws.
Yeah, I saw that 2 months ago.
We're really growing strong, and I'm really happy with that progress that we're doing.
Very cool.
But education is the forefront of it all.
Yep.
I look at every MSP that I talk to, and it's how are you educating your customers? It's not how are you pushing MFA, how are you pushing cybersecurity. It's how are you educating cybersecurity? Because we're all teachers, we're all educators, if we want to admit it or not.
And at some point, I think you have this other gap. I talked about this when I was on the stage just a little bit ago, but I think there's this challenge of we are held to a standard of explanation and education for a very large margin that other professions aren't. My CPA does not take any time teaching me how she does her K1. My CPA does not do any time teaching me how she filled out supporting form B or supporting form X. None of that actually goes into her world because I already trust her, right? When I hired her. I think that's one of the challenges we face is that today, in today's world, education is requisite because customers aren't at a state where they can trust the industry. They aren't at a state where they can trust the humans. They aren't at a state where we can just simply say, I have a certifiable level of knowledge and I'm making a decision that we need to move forward. Here's the outcome. Here's what it's going to change for you. So we spend so much time trying to educate about the threats, which feels very fear, uncertainty, and doubt-like, when the problem is if we were just allowed to make those decisions and allowed to do those things in ways that made sense, like my CPA or my attorney or any of that space does, we'd have a very different outcome. And so I think you're speaking correctly to the problem today. I imagine a time where our job will be less educational and more educational consultative around business functions than around the day-to-day details of why I need MFA or why those things become something that are built in and endemic and table stakes, in my opinion, down the road.
And I think some of that is because there is so much information out there that MSP 1 can say this, MSP 2 can say this, MSP 3 can say this. And they're all using similar tools, the same tools. It's just how they put it all together and bake the pie at the end of the day.
It depends conversation.
It depends.
One of the challenges in that too is there's also industry pundits that I think get into battles of this versus that, right? And answers there. Great example is I'm a firm believer in Control 5.6 and 6.7 on CIS that say centralize your authentication, centralize your SSO, centralize your MFA, centralize your log area. Right? But there's pundits out there right now in the industry that are telling MSPs they should carve out their SSO. They should get rid of it because it creates too much risk for them. And so I think that's what's changing in our industry. At some point, I can say I'm right because I can point to 5.6 and 6.7. I'm not making it up. I'm not shooting from the hip as to what is security. And I think that's one of the changes we're seeing in our industry too is significantly more focus on frameworks, significantly more focus on common language that means the same thing to you and me. And that hasn't existed. XDR is whatever you wanted to call it. MDR is whatever you want to call it, right? You get into Gartner inventing most of our language, not us.
So it's all marketing at that point. I'm going to create this new term for marketing so I can stand out in such a
Right.
busy crowd.
Right. Yeah. XAS, right?
Yep.
But I think that's kind of the point is I have hope. And, I was asked a question on the stage of Matt, what scares you when you go to bed at night? Not much. And it's not because I'm abject of the fear of the risk or I'm abject of, it's because I genuinely believe that this solves itself over time. I genuinely believe that if we fast forward 20 years, we have much different conversations about the maturity of our world around security and the maturity of the vendors making products. Like there's this gap. I've talked about this middle theory before. I just believe that products never rise much above or far very much below the consuming entity's maturity for very long, right? In the sense that as we mature, the product will have to raise to meet that. If I said I want an eating implement, I'm going to get anything. It could be a fork or a spoon. But at some point when I'm eating soup, I've learned enough that the spoon is the better implement for that, right? But you would have been just as happy with a fork if there was nothing, right? And so
Not a spork.
maybe a spork could have solved it. But I genuinely believe we're heading to a point where we're going to have enough nomenclatural understanding of what it takes to be more secure, and we're going to have enough discernment to say, sorry, vendor, you can't just call that startup mode where you fuck me on your security. It's not okay. That won't work. And as that maturity changes, which I believe it has, like you and I look back 5 years ago, how many people thought we were crazy when we were talking about security 5 years ago in our world? Now it's a mainstream. Now we actually get to be on stage. Us bearded idiots, right?
But now there's money behind it. It's like, oh no, we have to do this. And a lot of that is the media driven, breach this, breach that, breach this. It's almost getting to the point that everyone's so familiar hearing of the breaches that the concept of what did I lose has disappeared.
Yes.
Like I've seen that more and more in conversations.
Yep.
Well, my data was already breached with XYZ.
It's already happening. What
else? What else did I lose? Like at this point, I think I have credit monitoring with 5 different things.
I know.
Because my data has been breached and I got 5 different letters of, hey, here's your free credit monitoring.
Yep. Yeah, and I think these are all endemic parts of what it must have felt like through the Industrial Revolution, where technology grew so rapidly and profit was the first answer, and there was little to no regulation, and there was no insurance, and you had steam boilers kill people, and you had like you get to this point like Coney Island was fun just because you might die.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's in the early days, and so I think we're at that stage of building technology. We built it so deeply and intimately involved in every part of our life. You have a toaster that'll tell you what time it is, and connect into the internet and tell you your toast is done. Like nobody gave considerations to what if you could use that to remotely turn on the toaster at full tilt until it burns up. Like, is there a challenge here? Or
why not?
And so I think we're going to start seeing more of that. Even if you're saying I don't lose much because I've already been breached or I've already failed or I've already lost this data, you'll start having regulatory markets and insurance markets and people being more discerning and more not okay to be this level. And you say, well, this should already have happened. Go back and look at Data is Beautiful. There's a site called Data is Beautiful, and you can look at the breach records growth over X period of time. In 2008, if you took this dot, if you're looking at it as a Vario, there's one little dot over here and one little dot over there, and that's it. You fast forward to 2014, thousands of dots on top of each other. 2019, 2020, hundreds of thousands of dots on top of each other. And so you start realizing we're only in the early stages of this actually playing out, like significantly early stages of this. And the level of breadth of breach and loss and financial impacts and ransomwares and VECs and all of that has only just started to be in its run rate kind of conversation around this. So
I gave a presentation last week where, you can only talk about zero trust. You can only talk about cybersecurity so many ways that the same group of IT professionals.
Right.
So I took a different approach to it, knowing the audience, and I compared technology 20 years ago to today.
Sure.
And my best example was I brought up the topic of, if you look 10, 15 years ago, you had an internet connection that was 1.44 megs a second.
Right. Yeah.
Like it didn't matter how much data you had.
P1s. I'm crushing it.
The cyber criminal, the cyber actor out there wasn't going to capture much data before you realized, oh my God, my T1's like bottlenecking.
Sure.
And you look at now where we've evolved and we're pushing gigabit plus speed.
And we're also everywhere. And we have
everywhere.
everywhere to extract that from in different formats, right? In sessions. So, yeah.
Like that was just one of the great examples I gave.
Acceleration of the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's going to get better. I mean, I do believe, look at security by default as a concept. One of the things I was dealing with is I had a very high level executive at Microsoft I was talking to at the airlift, and she said to me, Matt, why do MSPs, for all lack of better terms, suck at getting their clients to do MFA? She basically called the stat that 26% of tenants in the ISP or IP world, the indirect provider world, that across all IPs, only 26% of customers had MFA turned on, right? And she said, Matt, is there something we could teach MFA to MSPs? Could we teach it to the IPs better? Could we do? I said, well, let me turn this problem around on you. Why do you have that where it's an option?
Yeah.
Oh, we could never just take away. Okay, you and I fight the same fucking capitalistic problem, right? In the sense that I can't just turn this off and fight that fight, and you can't either. And the reason is revenue. And what I think that comes out of that is a very large lawsuit surface. I believe you'll start seeing the Philip Morrises and the lawsuits by Fred Levin play out in your company chose known risk and chose profit over fixing that risk.
I remember when I started pushing MFA when I was in an MSP, and it started with education, and it started with telling the story. And the feedback that I got, it was, well, it's going to make us less productive.
Yeah,
it's going to slow down. It's going to slow us down. It's going to do this. And when I started educating through the process, it was, look, you're only going to get prompted for it with Microsoft the first time you log in on that device. It's not every single time you go and open Outlook. And they're like, oh, well, the way it was described, the way I thought is every time I go to open up Outlook, I got to type in this 60.
The other thing I like to challenge too is it's a real pain and it slows down business when I have to do lockout tags on my concrete tumbler. Yeah, but you stop killing people with concrete. Right? Like at some point you have this understanding of there are certain endemic parts of security that have to exist in a business that only come when people die or only come when people lose and I just think we're in that early stage of that, right? I mean, like, why do lockout tags exist? Because some poor schmuck got churned up in the gears and mechanics or something because he was in there working on it, right? And so you have to have that concept. Well, it made everything slower. At some point, there is a certain nature of speed that must exist for security. Same breath, back to the Starbucks conversation I had earlier. Starbucks put in FIDO tokens because it was faster as an MFA method and solved problems and was more secure, and it saved time to sell more coffee, right? Great. That's bringing it back into that business conversation of, you're right, but it should be enabling business in the same way. It should be protecting security at scale. But I do think that you're right. Trying to convince people of that understanding today when they're not required, there is no knowledge of it. It's me telling something as a snake oil salesman, compared to what I love doing is just demonstrating it. I love going, all right, fine, I'm going to send you an email. I want you to click on this link, type in your password, and you tell me if that you need MFA. And even then, which type of MFA, right? Because FIDO tokens stop something in the Evilgenics attack method that normal push notifications don't.
Correct.
Right? And so you have this escalatory capability. But short story is, I think that we're heading down a path where we will start seeing security by default as a primary, and you'll be forced to turn off that security by default because it's the only way these companies, I think, will survive. Right? If you look at tying, there was a ransomware event that was tied to a death of an infant in a hospital a few months ago. It's just now following a lawsuit on this, where the woman lost the baby. The baby died because the doctors, when they had a ransomware, said, we can still deliver this baby. We'll use charts. We'll use pencil and paper. We'll do all the things and they hadn't done it in 32 years or 20 years or 18 years. And so they lost the baby, and it was a medical malpractice. They failed, and lawsuits will solve that. And so what I do love about capitalism, what I do love about our litigious society, is you will create a point where somebody in a Fred Levin type style capability, right, comes in and says, Microsoft or whoever it may be, that's got a low enough attorney capacitance and enough money to go after, could have a class action lawsuit against them saying, you continuously made choices to not enable security features because you knew it would alienate your customers. And as a result, even though you had the knowledge, you made a choice to let them suffer. And if that turns into human death, if that turns into accidents, like if you look at Uber, I think there were 67 known incidents where the software code failed and created a wreck. Like 67 of them, right?
Wow.
So you'll start seeing lawsuits correct some of this because it's faster than precedent law. And it's faster than legislative law.
We took that same approach, actually, before I left the MSP, that we made the decision internally that we weren't going to do business with anyone that didn't meet our minimum security. Because the risk is just too great. And the way I put it out when I talk to other MSPs is, look, you have a simple question. And it's, if they get breached and they're on media or they're talking to someone, they're going to say, well, Joe's MSPs who was, handling our day-to-day business. And you're going to be like, whoa, they were just a time and material customer. But you know what?
Oh, bro.
That time that second story comes out, it's already all over nationwide. The breach is reported. Your name's in the dirt. Like, and that's
especially if you're a high-value target or something.
100%. You're just trying to save face, and the media is going to eat you alive for that just as much.
And I have found that when I'm prescriptive like that, when I just say this is what we're doing, the attrition hasn't outweighed the benefit.
No, not at
Like,
all.
I have not lost customers in some grand swath of inability to move forward.
Nope.
I've just had to deal with some uncomfortableness.
Yep.
And I think a lot of times people are afraid of that and would rather try to go sell in a positive light.
Yep.
But that takes a lot longer. If I need to sell 100 customers MFA, I have to meet with 100 fucking customers.
Yep. Either way.
If I'm just going to send out an email and say, I'm turning this on, and here's the next steps, and here's what you can expect, and here's how much we're going to charge you, I only have to deal with the ones that say no.
Yeah.
I've filtered it down. I have a
Yep.
less, and they're very interested in meeting.
Yes. Yes.
Right? It's a very different methodology. So I like being prescriptive as a security practitioner, at least where you can. And I think to your
100%.
point, define where that line is. Is it control 10? Is it control 3? Where am I going to define a line of I must have this, right? And I think that's the difference. When you were doing it at that time and when I was doing it at my time, I was just making up the things I thought mattered the most.
Yep.
I didn't have some hierarchical implement to be able to say, here's the direction it needs to go, and here's the risk it bounds. Here's where this was an IG3 thing at the 18 level, which means it's already through 3 passes. This one's a very high level. I might not care about this one, but I'm going to at least care about level 3 or 5 that says have MFA and 6 that says have MFA. I'm going to do those first.
And
right?
NIST is so large. It's like for an MSP that doesn't have the capacity, they start looking at NIST as like, oh my God, you're migrating.
Daunting. I can't, I can't do this all. And
Whereas now we have CIS controls, which is a very
Iterative.
straightforward.
Yeah.
If you're in Australia, you have the Essential 8.
God bless them. They're making a modified essentially.
And and that's the basic stuff. It's like, what are the core things that we need to be doing every single day?
Yeah.
And that's the starting point. Like, you're not going to get to zero trust in a weekend. You're not going to get there in a week.
Let alone read enough of the guidances for special publications like 800-207 and some of the others around zero trust to even start understanding the whole point of it. And you have then marketing people saying, I am zero trust.
Oh my God.
Right? And I don't mean to be that guy, but that is the way it is. And so there's a
message
lot of forces at play that break
Yeah.
this problem right now.
The message gets skewed in marketing lingo of, okay, zero trust sales. Let's market this. Let's do this.
Yeah, 100%. Well, listen, brother, I could chat with you all day, every day.
I love
And
this.
we do.
We do.
But it was great to get to sit down with you here at IOTSSA. Julie and Lee, thanks for bringing us both
Yeah.
here. It's very awesome to be involved in this. And, I like to tell people, the people that are at these conferences, not just because I'm speaking or not even when I'm speaking, but people self-selecting to go learn these things and people self-selecting to go be in the moment of understanding this have the highest chance of winning this battle, in my opinion.
Agreed.
It's how I've grown my knowledge. I think it's how you've grown yours, is right, getting punched in the face and then learning. It's usually the methodology. But people being at these events that get a step up, I think.
Absolutely.
So thank you, brother.
Hey,
As always.
another fun one.
Yeah, man.
See ya.
See you later.